Welcome to another edition of Inspired Stories, where leaders share their experiences so we can learn from their successes, how they've overcome adversity, and explore current challenges they're facing.
Welcome to another edition of the Inspired Stories podcast, where leaders share their experiences so we can learn from their successes and be inspired by how they've overcome adversity. My name is Anthony Codispoti, and today's guest is Tamar Andrews, preschool director at Temple Isaiah. Located in Los Angeles, California, the preschool portion of the temple has been open since 1957, and Tamar has been director for a little over 20 years. She's also a professor at the UCLA Graduate School of Education and Information Studies. She is a university instructor at Cal State University, Dominguez Hills. She is a college instructor at Santa Monica College. She's also the director of the Early Childhood Education Department at the American Jewish University. And we're going to hear how she has now fixed everything that's wrong with the American education system. She's conducting research on professional development called Teacher Addictive Behaviors, which explores why we've got professional development all wrong. We're going to hear a lot more about that. Before we get into all that good stuff, today's episode is brought to you by my company, Add Back Benefits Agency, where we offer very specific and unique employee benefits that are both great for your team and fiscally optimized for your bottom line. One recent client was able to add over $900 per employee per year in extra cash flow by implementing one of our proprietary programs. Results vary for each company, and some organizations may not be eligible. To find out if your company qualifies, contact us today at addbackbenefitsagency.com. Okay, now back to our guest today, the preschool director at Temple Isaiah. Tamar, I appreciate you making the time to share your story today.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So, we've got a whole bunch of really good stuff to dive into here today. I'm really excited about. So maybe let's just get a truncated, an abbreviated version of what was the inspiration for you first getting started in childhood education?
Oh, this was not supposed to be my career. I was actually accepted to at the time, a specialized program at UCLA where you would do your undergrad and grad school and then go straight into medical school. And as you know, all Jewish parents want, I was going to be that proverbial Jewish doctor. And while I was going to school, I was working in a childcare center and loved it. Loved it.
So this was like a daycare? This was a school for young children?
Yeah, it was a preschool right near UCLA's campus. I would go to school in the morning, and I was the afternoon kind of like, watch the kids, watch them play around in the playground. And I was looking at these little kids going, God, they're so strange. They have no basis in logic or reality. Everything is make-believe. And I just found myself observing them and going, God, this is so strange. Why don't they think normally?
And so was that the time where you said, okay, I'm going to change my direction, change my major?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I wanted to know more. I wanted to know, I had taken one of those, required psych classes, and the whole Freud, tell me about your mother and tell me about your childhood. And I thought, wow, there's so much wrong in the world. Imagine if I could get them when they're really young and fix them when they're young. Maybe I could fix the world. I'm an idealist. Quite obviously.
We need more of that. So that's a great lead into my next question. I want to hear more about the work that you're doing at the American Jewish University, and to use your words, how you've now fixed everything that's wrong with the American education system. You've got listeners on the edge of their seats. So tell us.
Well, so turning on my professor hat for a minute, our educational system in the United States was actually created in the late 1800s. And it was created by these really rich white men, if you will, who had also created auto factories and other kinds of factories. And so our school system really resembles a factory. You go into one room, you get your English, you come out, you go into another room, you get your math, you come out. And it's this not at all connected, buffet of stuff that you have no choice over what to get. And if you're blessed and you can master what's in every room, you come out with, that perfect car. But if you're not, your life almost feels like you're sent to the junkyard. And if you do get through it, you're then sent to another factory called college. And the first 2 years of college is really a regurgitation of your last few years of high school. So you've got to take that same psych class again, and the same English class again, and the same math class again. And for many people, especially nowadays, when our job market is really looking to the future, not looking for skills you developed over a lifetime, but hoping that you are going to be the one inventing skills for the future, our school system is not really set up for people to work creatively, collaboratively, collegially. Our school system was set up to simply regurgitate, have a test, take it on your own, and do things independently, void of all of those C's, right? The creativity, collaboration, etc. And so having gone through college, and especially when I did my master's at a school called Cal State Los Angeles, I started off with 45 students in my cohort. Now, not everybody was in the same class with me because you were able to take whatever classes you wanted, right? And by the time I got to sit down for my comp exams, there were 6 of us. And again, being an observer of human nature, I thought, God, this really, wow, how horrible for those people, not even being able to finish this degree that they started, many of whom had done at least a full year or more, but not being able to finish that degree for whatever reasons. And I thought, one day, I'm going to build this perfect, university experience for folks, and nobody's going to fail my program. And that's how that was born.
So that's how the idea came about.
Yeah.
How many years ago?
Oh, I'm a grandma.
So a few years ago.
A few years ago, the idea was born. I actually pitched it at Temple Isaiah many times. I said, let's just build a university program here. I can do it. I promise I can do it. And, I think people doubt sometimes your ability to create something from nothing. And I was doing such a successful job in the preschool program. Why rock the boat? Until one day I was at an awards banquet. There's this great program on the East Coast called Matan, and it's teaching people how to do better at special needs in school. And for me, having a child with special needs, it was really something that touched my heart. And I went in as a trainee. And so they were giving an award to this woman, Meredith Polsky, who had started this program. And this woman comes up to me and goes, "Oh, are you Dr. Andrews?" And I said, "Yeah, hi." And she said, "Oh, I've heard about you. We have a little program at American Jewish University. Do you want to come teach a class for us?" And I said, "Oh," the light bulb went off, that proverbial, and I just spilled it out. I said, "No, I want to make a degree program." And she laughed. And I think she was waiting for me to laugh back. And I didn't. And it took her a moment. And she said, "No, you're serious." And I said, "Yeah, I'm serious." And that was in March. And in August, we were WASC accredited, the highest level of accreditation. We opened our doors to our first 18 students in a master's degree. And so you might ask, why a master's first? Because I needed to prepare the next cohort of college instructors to then open a BA and have them teach my BA students, because they would know how this program works. And sure enough, that's how it is today with our BA, master's, and doctoral program.
And so what does somebody notice differently about this program as they're going through it? What have you fixed?
Yeah, so you mentioned my research. My research is teacher addictive behaviors. And, at Temple Isaiah, before COVID, we had about 75 teachers. And some of them were there for 25 or 30 years. And, I came in college instructor and professional development. I do professional development all over the world. And I'm going to come in and I'm going to fix them all. And I would do these professional developments. I remember one in particular I did on STEM in early childhood. I even wrote the book on how to do STEM in early childhood. And they were all really excited. And I was feeling like, oh, I'm going to be great at this. And after about a week, I walked into the classrooms and maybe 2 classrooms are doing STEM, nobody else. I thought, what did I do wrong? I mean, I did such a great lecture and hands-on, and I set everything up. I did it all right. Why is nobody doing STEM with their kids? They're all doing what they've been doing for the last 10, 15, 20 years. And that's when the idea started to, foment for me, which was, oh, they're addicted. They're just addicted to the old ways. Okay. And, it took a while because I had to
Changing habits is hard. Yeah.
Oh, I always say that the hardest thing a human will do is change. And if it was easy, you would never see a doctor smoking outside of the hospital, right? Because they know better. And so what I realized was I've got to change the way we do things. So, diamonds are only formed by pressure. Now, too much pressure gives you anxiety and stress. Just the right, and it'll crack, right? It'll totally crack that piece of coal. But the right amount of pressure, you have to really figure out what that right amount of pressure and who the pressure comes from. So for example, at AJU, the way we've changed our education system is you start off with the same group of students you matriculate through the entire degree with. So that provides peer pressure, right? Just a little bit of peer pressure. And then the other problem is that in most teacher prep programs, you don't do your student teaching until the end of your degree. By then, you've forgotten everything you've learned. So our program has, you have to document and do your practicum work every single semester, documenting how you have implemented what you've learned in the class into your classroom. And the third thing that we apply, which is pressure from somebody who's more knowledgeable, like your sponsor at AA, somebody who's been through it, is you have a mentor. Everybody is assigned a personal mentor who will also exert just that right amount of pressure. So that in the last 6 years, we've only had one student not make it through our degree program.
Wow.
Which is very different than what you see in most American universities.
So what I'm hearing, tell me if I got this right, there's a little bit of peer pressure because they're in the same class with everybody going, through the whole program. The third, and I'll skip to the third thing, you've got the mentor who's also helping them through all of this. And the thing that I think kind of stuck out to me as maybe the most impactful or perhaps the most novel is that regular practical application of what it is that they're learning. Not just you learn it here as a theory in week 1, and then 2 years later you're expected to retain that and put it into practice. But we're teaching you a new way of doing things over here, and then very shortly afterwards you've got to put that into play.
Exactly. You got it exactly right. And after 2 or 3 years, it has now become internalized behaviors.
So the work that you've been doing in the research into the professional development, this is all dovetailed into the work that you're doing at the American Jewish University. This is sort of part and parcel, one and the same.
Well, yeah, exactly. You've got it right. Because now after 6 years, we see the success, right? You can only make a hypothesis, but you have to see the hypothesis either proven or disproven in action. And so I think after these 6 years, we have seen that hypothesis proven in action. And it's proven by our graduates having earned more money, having higher positions, being given much bigger raises. And also, we're very blessed by having a lot of foundations give us money to fund this in order for more people to afford to attend our program.
And so at what point do you feel like we can start to see and perhaps even measure the matriculation of this knowledge down into high schools, grade schools, et cetera?
Oh, that's...
Because it sounds like you're focused on the top, right? Which is kind of where it needs to start. You need to teach the teachers. Right. And you're teaching at the highest level, the master's teachers, so they can then teach the bachelor programs. And then when do you think we start to kind of see this, for kids my age who are 8 and 10?
Yeah. That's another hard one to crack. So part of the problem in our school system as well, we actually have a class in our master's called Social Justice, the unintended consequences of good intentions. And I think that for many of our legislatures and organizations, NGOs, whoever they are, the idea of having these standardized tests and measuring children's performance was a good intention, right? They thought it would keep teachers in check by making sure that they got all children to read and all children to do math and science, etc. But it was to the exclusion, I think the complete exclusion of social, emotional, and moral development.
And so what's to be done about that?
Oh, if I have this little line I say to people all the time. If I was queen of the world,
I'm making you queen for the day. What would you do?
The nice thing about our school system in some regards is that we already have the cohort model, right? We have that cohort model. Kids matriculate through school unless you move together. But I'll preface this by adding this line. When you go to prison, you are identified by your crime. And when you go to school, you're first identified by your special need. And that's a really sad foundation to begin with. Imagine if our school system started you off in a cohort and first identified everybody by their superhero skill, right? So I have a child who is special needs, although now you would never know it. I think in part I was blessed. He was my number 4. And so I knew what to do with him at the time. But he was always, and my daughter is probably going to get mad at me for saying this, but I think he's the funniest one in the family. And he always made us laugh. Even, in the throes of his autistic behavior, and he has level 2 autism, he always made us laugh. He always knew how to put everybody at ease. That's his superhero strength. And also, because he had autism, he perseverated. And because perseverate is when you can't get off of something, you kind of hyper focus. And because of that, he is now a master coder. And he and his brother built an app that is now in almost every state of the country, and they've got government contracts. And I'm very proud they made Forbes 30 under 30 last year.
Oh, that is impressive. Can we quickly call out the name of the app?
Sure. It's called Playground. They built it for me. It's a childcare management app. I had gone to them one day and said, hey, my app's not working. Can you fix it? And they said, oh, Mom, that's not a good app. We'll make one for you. And they did. And now it's everywhere. The idea that you can take a child's superpower and actually focus on it, right? Just absolutely focus on it and turn them into real life superheroes is what we should be doing in our school system. And so, you've got to have teachers talk to each other. And so you say things like, oh, in math, we're going to be learning about triangles. So in history class, why don't you learn about pyramids or learn about something related to triangles or shapes? Make things more interconnected. Make it so that children see, the application of the theory in some classes to the real life application in other classes, the same way we do at the university, where you have to actually work on what you're learning in the classroom. Make it real. Make it exciting. Make it something that is not just on Xerox sheets.
So going back to the fixes that you're implementing for the American education system. So how does this scale? How do you get this out more? I know you said you've got some people who are giving donors who are, giving you grants and giving you money that are helping to expand the education system there at the American Jewish University. Do you see taking this program to other higher learning institutions?
FERPA will not allow me to name names, but I will tell you that our incoming cohort for our doctoral program has the chairs of many early and education departments in the country. So that is one way I think we will be able to eventually spread this out wider and farther.
So this means that the ways in which education is being taught at universities now could begin to change significantly in the next several years because of this new relationship that's forming?
Well, I don't know that I would say significantly in several years.
Okay.
I was just asked by one of our donors, if you have such a long waiting list, why don't you expand your program? So we went from 18 students 6 years ago to now just about 200. And I really believe in building, the structure one brick at a time to make sure each one is perfectly positioned. I think the changes will have to be slow and methodical in order to take hold. Again, doing that ongoing, just enough pressure to where you don't break things, but you slowly start to see those changes. Don't forget, our American education system has been ingrained in this way for over 150 years. It's not going to change in 5. So it's going to have to change slowly and methodically. I am hopeful, though, that through the courses that we created at AJU, that the more immediate changes will be in the addition of the social, emotional, and moral development teaching in schools at any age. Literally at any age.
Do you feel like there needs to be a component of this that's not just teaching the teachers, but teaching their bosses, the administrators, the principals, people they report to?
Absolutely. And not only that, but at AJU, we're also going to be opening up a parenting institute because parents have to be our partners. I'm going to ask you actually a question. I'll put you on the spot. Right. From the time, but you got to answer kind of quickly. From 2 to 18, what percentage of your life did you spend in school?
I would say 25%.
So it was less than 10.
Okay.
Even an 8-hour school day would be 33%, right? But then take out Saturday, like weekends, holidays, vacations, sick days, etc. It's going to be less than 10. And so the most important person that we teach until a child is about 8 is not the child, it's the parent. Because if the parents, again, that just the right amount of pressure, right? So whatever we are teaching at school has to be continued at home so that just that right amount of pressure is continuously applied. It's kind of like CPR, right? You only build up pressure in the body when you're doing CPR. If you stop CPR for even a second, blood pressure goes down to 0. You've got to keep it going so that body stays alive. And the same thing is true about moral, social, and emotional development. You've got to keep that pressure going so that way when the child, is engaged in a novel experience and they don't yet have it internalized as to how to respond to that experience, that little bit of pressure will make sure that they respond appropriately to eventually become an internalized response.
Something you said that I really liked, it resonated with me, is focusing on the child's superhero power instead of their special need to start with. Obviously, you can't ignore the special need that needs attention, right? But if you lead with, this is what makes you special, this is what you're amazing at, it's a much warmer invite to the student, right?
Yeah, this is what makes you special instead of you have special needs.
Right. I think, as human beings, we're naturally wired, especially, I can say I am, to look for the problems. What's the thing that needs fixed today? I'm looking around the house, the refrigerator's acting up, the toilet's running. These are problems that need to be fixed. And just by default, I look at my kids the same way. You're not paying attention. You're, leaving your clothes everywhere. You're fighting with your brother. But when we focus on all the bad things, that's all that they hear is bad, 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 negative, negative, negative. And if you can, you can't ignore those things. They don't go away unless, you're teaching and you're coaching. But if we can reframe things in a way that, hey, I really love it when you pick up your clothes. You know what you're really great at is X, Y, and Z.
Yeah. I watch my daughter and my son-in-law. They're raising my 3 grandkids who are 5, 4, and 2. And whenever one of them does something inappropriate or starts crying for a reason that they shouldn't really be crying, the first go-to line that they say to their child is, I think you have other choices to make right now. What could be another choice for you to make right now? And it's such a neutral statement, right? There's no good or bad to what, my kids are saying to my grandkids, but their answer is just, their line is just, and I thought, wow, imagine if every parent simply asked their children, what are other choices you could be making right now? That thought process, right, will take you into the future going, okay, I've got a problem right now. What is another choice I could be making that will yield a better result for me? Oh, what a world it could be, right?
And they're saying this to their 5-year-old?
To their 2-year-old.
To their 2-year-old even.
Oh, yeah. And not only that, but it causes them to stop dead in their tracks and think for a minute. So you go out of that limbic, right, that emotional state, because I'm asking a question that causes you to have to, like it forces your decision making to go up to your logical brain and consider your options for a minute. Think about the person who's road raging. They're not considering their options at the moment.
And how do you get a person who's in an elevated state to even consider that question? Especially a child, but I mean, even an adult, like you mentioned, road rage, they're not accessing that part of their brain.
So 2 tips that, as a child development expert, number 1 is put your eye gaze to the child, make your eyes lower than the child's, because the child always wants to be in a position of control, right? That's what a young child wants more than anything in the world, is to be in charge or in control. And as soon as your eyes are lower than your child, so you're kind of at a kneeling position, your child already physically feels, okay, I'm in control of this situation. And that helps lower some of the cortisol and the adrenaline for the moment. And the other thing is talk low and slow. Most parents, when they see their child misbehaving, their adrenaline and cortisol starts, increasing as well. And they'll talk much quicker and, raising their voice. But you've really got to stop and listen when somebody speaks low and slow. You've got to really kind of focus on those words.
I like that. I'm taking notes both for follow-up questions, but also to share with my wife later, because these are some gems. I think I'm going to take that one question that you just gave me and put it on a T-shirt. What are other choices you could be making right now? I'm going to make one for everyone in the family, because I need to ask myself that same thing at times as well.
Yeah.
So I do want to talk about Temple Isaiah and your role as preschool director there. But before I get there, when I was Googling your name and prepping for the interview, Tamar Andrews, I kept seeing a lot of references to Kanye West. What is that about?
There are not many of us in the field who both are professors and know the theory as well as build schools. And one of the things that I enjoy doing is helping people open schools or help build up existing schools to be more successful. And so I got a call from a lawyer one day who said, hey, is this Dr. Andrews? Yeah. We've got a school we've just opened. We'd like to hire you to help, kind of help the admin and take it to accreditation and run it for us. And didn't know until I walked into the building and had accepted the job. And I said, wow, everybody here wears black. It's kind of interesting.
Okay.
And somebody said, yeah, Yay only lets us wear black here. And I said, oh, I didn't know what a Yay was. I thought it was like some organization. And lo and behold, it's Mr. West. And it was a job that at the time, I didn't know anything about him. I actually don't listen to that kind of music. For anybody that wants to know, I am an EDM aficionado. I go to Ultra and all of those kinds of things, Electric Daisy. And I wear my candy on my wrist all the time. And I had met with the principal. She was a lovely woman. She had never really worked in a school before. And can you please help us? They really didn't know what they were doing. And so I started working there. It was a great gig. And just as a consultant, I'm still director at Isaiah. And the cool thing about the job was that I was allowed to start from scratch. I mean, how often do you get to start from scratch with a preschool through 12th grade school? And I brought in concepts like restorative justice, which is something very near and dear to my heart. I also brought in something called UDL, which is Universal Design for Learning, which again gives every kid their superpower. And aside from wearing black, which I generally didn't do anyways, the school was it was amazing until I got a message from a friend of mine on LinkedIn saying, oh my gosh, I just saw that you're working for Kanye West. You shouldn't be working for him. And this was literally at the same time, on the same day that I get a call from him that he wanted to talk about something. And he said, I've had a really rough day. Can we please discuss whatever it is about the school? And I said, you've had a rough day. Oh my God. Like, hello, I'm the only Jewish person that works in this school. And realized at that moment that I probably shouldn't be working there. And so I called the principal up the next morning and I said,
so just for context here,
yeah.
That this was a time when he was going off on some anti-Semitic rants.
Yeah,
online.
big time anti-Semitic.
So that's what triggered all of this. Yeah,
yeah.
Please continue.
And I was born in Israel. I am a very proud Jew. And, I've dealt with anti-Semitism my whole life. And it doesn't bother me when people say, yeah, I don't like Jews. They probably just don't know enough of us or haven't experienced enough of us, or they've only had a bad experience with a Jewish person. So being around anti-Semitism, I'm a product of Holocaust survivors, doesn't shake me, but it wasn't a school where I to this day, I have not received one phone call from a parent in a very Christian school, not one call from a parent or the pastor, nobody. The only ones that I got calls from were one of my closest friends, Kelly, shout out to Kelly, who quit with me, and the principal who also quit. And kudos to them. Wasn't something that I wanted to stand for. And I will tell you, this is the first time that I'm ever talking about it publicly. Never granted any interviews. I didn't want to make any money off of him anymore. I actually got calls from lawyers. You want to sue him? And I was like, no, I'm not going to make any more money off of him. Let him be in peace. I'm going my own way. And that was it.
So you were able to help get the program off the ground. You were still there working as a consultant. And then all of this blows up. And you were like, man, I didn't know I was signing up for this. Like, I'm getting interview requests. I'm getting, probably people offering to pay you. People who want to.
My kids were actually bombarded by paparazzi. My work was called. Every consulting job I've had, they pulled photos of me from my Facebook where I'm like baking challah. I guess it's as Jewy a picture as they could get for their cover story. It's not something I'm ashamed of. I'm actually proud to have, been the Jewish educator that quit his school. But at the end of the day, it didn't define me or anything about me. I'm just, I focus on the future. I don't spend any time on the past. It's wasted energy.
And so that was a big part of your decision not to grant interviews around this, not to take part in any lawsuits. You were like, wow, that's hurtful and painful. And the best thing for me to do is focus on tomorrow and just step aside and put my energies on things that are helpful and building and creative and constructive.
And the school doesn't exist. I mean, it's once I quit and the principal quit, it crumbled. It doesn't exist.
Oh, so the school, it fell apart. It's no longer.
Oh yeah, there was nobody running it.
Okay. And so I'm curious, as you look back at that experience, how has it informed or shaped decisions that you make going forward? Do you look at new opportunities differently?
I have turned down several consulting jobs. I will vet everybody, or I'll have somebody vet people for me. It has also really made me focus much more on the program at AJU, realizing that, it's not just anti-Semitism. There are people who are racist and prejudiced in many ways. And prejudice, no matter how much information you get to the contrary, it's still ingrained in you, kind of like those addictive behaviors. And we have a lot more work to do as humans. And at least for me, in the institutions of education, it's where I can try to make some of those dents.
I'm curious, with the Kanye West situation, if you had that sort of vetting process in place at that time, was there anything prior to the big blow up that we're talking about that would have indicated his feelings, his tendencies in those areas? His prejudices,
I had actually contacted a relative by marriage who had been studying Jewish texts with Kanye. And I said, hey, have you heard what's going on? And he said, no, I've been like, no, because I think it's just the paparazzi making noise about him or taking things out of context. And the truth is, I don't get TV in my home, so I don't watch news. I really am so busy with the work I do that I don't really know what's going on in the bigger world unless somebody, shares it with me. My head is really in academia. I don't have I'll give you a little, I finished 3 years of chemo about a year ago. I was told that I had stage 4, cancer, and I wasn't going to make it past a few more years. And I was very blessed. I was patient number 2 in a clinical trial. And here I stand today. And I've got this renewed perspective about how I spend my time. So I try really hard not to waste time. It's very precious to me. So, vetting process, no, there was no, I'm an idealist. Remember that. I think everybody is wonderful.
We need more of that. Please don't lose that.
Thanks.
Okay, so let's shift gears away from that into fun things, good things, areas that you're having lots of positive impact, like Temple Isaiah. You're the preschool director there. You've been there for 20 years.
Yeah.
Tell me, what does your day-to-day at that institution look like?
So I've actually handed the reins of directing over to a woman who has become one of my best friends. Her name is Avital. And she is now, I am the director emeritus. So I still play a role there. I'm actually going to do professional development there in a couple weeks. And she is the one that has taken over the day-to-day. I will tell you, using that app that I talked about before that my kids made for me has made it, even when I was going through chemo, that app has made it so simple to run any early childhood educational institution because the whole school resides on your phone. And so she now gets the fun of going in and hanging out with the teachers. And I'm the one that really gets called for the big problems. But there aren't any. It's, we've got a staff now that has been there forever. There's very little turnover at Isaiah, which is, again, unheard of because in childcare, the average turnover of teachers is 40% a year. And, there was a great study for any of you listening that might be in the field of education. There was a great study done a long time. Oh, God, we're going back maybe 15 years. And they asked school administrators, why do you think teachers stay in their jobs? And the administrators all said money. And then they went to those same schools and asked all the teachers, why do you stay in your job? Not why you take the job, why you stay in the job. And the number one reason was a feeling of being in on things. And what that meant was that if you feel ownership of the school you're a part of, rather than being a renter, right? Renters move from place to place. And if the water's dripping, renters don't care. But if you're an owner, you care when the water's dripping. And so when you're an owner, you feel like, there's a problem. I can fix it, or I can tell somebody and they're going to fix it because they trust me. And so we have built up a staff there that is consistently of the highest caliber, many of whom, by the way, have taken the degree program at AJU, including Avital. as a result, we've got a staff that is, I'm just very proud of them, an incredible staff.
Tell me more about how you instill that sense of ownership in the team. This is always one of my favorite questions to ask people in a tight labor market. They got tighter, coming out of COVID. It's hard to find good people. It's hard to retain good people. And, when I ask this question, a lot of people, well, we focus on benefits. We try to pay them well. We try to treat them with respect. I think these are all important boxes to check, but you've touched on something I think really important here. And yet you want to feel valuable. You want to feel like you're a part of a team. And in your words, you want to feel like you've got some kind of ownership in the process. How do you build that culture? How do you communicate that to people?
That's a great question, because I think if more people did it, you wouldn't have what the news is calling a teacher shortage. There is no teacher shortage. It's that people are leaving the field because they don't enjoy it anymore. And so the ownership comes from several components. So number one, it's making people feel like they have a superhero strength, right? Making them really understand that you are valued here because there is something that you are contributing that we don't think anybody else can do. And really catching them behaving in that way, like catching them while they're using their superhero strength. I remember once there's a teacher named Sharon, shout out to Sharon. And she was, again, eye level lower than the child. The child is having a really hard moment outside the hallway. And she's talking in her low and slow voice in a patient way. And she got that child to calm down faster than anybody I've ever seen a child calm down. And she respected that child so much in that moment, where most people would have been like, oh my God, that kid is driving me nuts. She respected him in that moment. And she gave him so much unconditional love while he was having that meltdown. And so afterwards, I simply went over to her, touched her on the shoulder and said, I saw you. I just want you to know I saw you. She didn't see me watching her. She had her back to me. I said, I saw you. And I wish every child could experience what I just saw you do with that child. And I think for her in that moment, it was more valuable than any money I could have possibly have given her, because I recognized her superhero strength. And so that's number one. Number two, and here's a monetary thing. At Temple Isaiah, again, before COVID, we had like 350 kids. We had a budget up the gazoo. We had so many kids. I gave ownership of part of the budget back to the teachers. And I said to them, listen, I don't work in your classrooms. You do. So I'm going to give every classroom, $1,000 on top of all the supplies and everything else that we get, each class, and you can spend it however you want. Now, if you want to take that $1,000 and all of you guys go to Hawaii, so be it, but you're not getting any more money. So use it wisely. But, like one group, they were having some infighting in their group. And one of the teachers came to me and she goes, we don't spend all this money. Can I take 100 of it? Would it be okay? We're all going to go out to dinner because we've got to get some bonding going. I said, your money. I think that's a great idea. Perfect use of the money. But great. And so they have ownership that way. The other thing that we did was we created a very transparent salary scale. So nobody ever has to wonder if the person who's sitting right next to them is making more or less than they are. They know exactly how much everybody makes. And they also know what the teacher levels are and what you have to do to get to the next level, so that you are in control. You are literally, you take ownership of your salary and your position in the school.
Hearing your story about the call out that you gave to that teacher, the private little call out, and complimenting them for how they responded to that child. I think parents listening to this is a good reminder for them. They can provide teachers with similar types of affirmation. I did this on a private Zoom call with one of my son's teachers and really thanked her for the way that she was able to help him through some challenges that he was going through. And I knew that she was going to be good at that because I had witnessed her in a classroom 2 years ago with my older son, helping an autistic child calm down, and keep himself sort of centered, and doing it in a very subtle way that didn't draw a whole lot of attention. And I could tell that meant a lot to her in the moment. But a few months later, she ran into my wife at a social event, and she brought that up and how much that meant to her to have felt seen and appreciated.
And validated.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I think, as parents, right, a lot of times we're in contact with the teachers when something's going wrong. Our child has misbehaved, or we feel like they're not getting the attention or the services that they need. And then a lot of the good things that happen aren't getting called out because, hey, good, things are going smooth. I'm going to get back to what I was doing. I'm going to go on about my day. But I think, whether it's, a boss in an education situation or a parent in an education situation, it's really nice when you can call attention to those positive things that happen, because there's a lot more of those in almost every scenario than there are the negative ones. And everybody likes to hear those. That's good food for the soul.
I don't think we compliment enough. I was in the elevator the other day, and there was a woman who had put together just the most perfect outfit. And I said to her, I said, I don't know how long it took you to get dressed today, but you have literally put yourself together in a way that is perfect. You are like Vogue cover ready. And she looked at me and she goes, oh my gosh, do you think my husband will notice?
What's his number? I'll text him now.
That was so cute. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. You mentioned budgets. Another question that I like to ask is, as leaders of different types of businesses, education institutions, we've always got to keep our eye on the bottom line, right? The P&L, because that matters to keep the doors open and keep things running smoothly. And I'm curious, in all of your years of experience, there's sort of two levers that we can pull there. One is how do we drive more revenue? And the other is how do we lower expenses? Can you think of creative ways in which you've pulled one or more of those levers in the past?
Oh, sure. Well, first of all, benefits are a much more bottom line friendly way to spend or allocate a certain amount of money, because you don't have to add the other 25% that you would to a payroll increase when you add in, unemployment and health and all these other taxes that are tied to payroll. And the other thing too is I don't think employees recognize how much benefits cost a company. So when we create contracts, we don't put in just your hourly salary and say, oh, and we're going to add health benefits. We put in the actual dollar amount that all of that stuff is going to cost us. Again, full transparency over the budget, because ownership. And, revenue is a fixed number in most schools because, tuition is tuition. You can always try to fundraise, but those dollars are now, being spread. I think families are spreading those donation dollars across multiple places. I like to bring the employees in, the teachers in, and say, look, I want to give you guys, I only have money for a 5% increase next year or a COLA increase. I would love it to be 10%. Can we brainstorm ideas of ways to bring in more money? Because when you get that hive mind going, you get many more lucrative ideas than if I try to think of them on my own and impose them on my teachers. So rather than me imposing them on the teachers, if I get them to think, oh, these new creative financial ideas are my ideas, then again, there's that ownership component. And they are then in charge, right, of how to earn more money in order for you to make more money.
Like that. How is the movement towards the transitional kindergarten program in California affecting you guys?
Oh, well, it's going to be everywhere. I think eventually the government is going to fund 3 and up. It's affected schools because obviously their 4s and 5s are going to public school. Most schools, if they saw this coming, as we did, you started creating spaces for younger children. And I think especially now post-COVID, we have more and more families who are dual income earners, or there are people who are single, parents and need to make more money. And schools have to adapt. So where schools used to be open from 9 to 3, you've got to be open from, I'd say, 7 to 6. And ways to increase the bottom line is to offer flexible opportunities for parents to enroll their kids. And by doing so, you also increase the number of spaces you can actually put in. So if I've got a kid coming from, let's say, 7 to 3, and another parent needs somebody from 12 to 6, I have almost like a 1.5, full-time enrollment going in for one space. Licensing has also been doing some creative stuff. For example, in California, here's a tip if you don't know this. If you're a licensed childcare provider in California, you can actually almost double your capacity if you get the fire department to sign off on you not using the yards with the whole school at the same time. So if you can show that you've got a yard schedule where half are outside and half are inside, you can almost double your capacity. So we were able to go from 176 to 300 and something overnight by doing that.
Wow. So with the transitional kindergarten, this is affecting, what's the age group? 4 and 5 year olds are now in
right now it's fours, but it's going to go down to 3s.
And do you think that's going to completely do away with 3s and 4s in preschools because now there's the public component, or some people are going to continue to stay in a private institution like yours because you have more services, better offerings, longer hours perhaps than a public school would?
Yeah, I think it's the same thing like any kindergarten, right? You still have private and public kindergartens. Families are going to put their children where their friends are for religious beliefs, for community involvement, and public school enrollment is actually on a decline. So here, I'll give you the problem. Take a school like Westwood Charter, which is one of the big public schools in our neighborhood. Families will move into that neighborhood because they want to send their kids to a great public school. They'll move in, and then their kids are going to go to school there from K through 8, and then junior high and high school. So they're not moving out. So if there isn't any inventory for new families to move in with kindergartners, they're going to have to move to another area where there is housing and go to that public school. As a result, that family staying in Westwood Charter, right, in that location, Westwood Charter had a very low enrollment a few years ago. They had no choice but to offer the earlier class, the 4-year-olds, because they had to get kids in order to get their state funds, their tax dollars, if you will, in order to fund their school. And as those families start to stay, and there's no inventory, they're going to have no choice but to go to 3-year-olds in order to fund their school. And on top of this, the double whammy is that we had the Jarvis Initiative, Prop 13 in California. So that family that might have moved in 10 years ago, excuse me, and is staying there for life, their property tax will remain the same for the duration of their staying in that home.
Wow.
So the public school dollars come from property tax. So now the schools are also cash strapped because nobody's selling their homes, right? And they're still getting the same amount of tax dollars that they got 10 or 20 years ago. And it's not enough for the raises the teachers need, the infrastructure, the capital, improvements we need to make, et cetera. So that is part of the huger, the much larger problem with the public schools in California. And as a result, many parents then are sending their kids to private school because the only way the public schools know how to fix this is to pack more kids into a class.
How does what's the class size at Westwood Charter compare to what somebody would find at your school?
Oh, so our school has a teacher ratio of 1 to 4.
What?
or 1 to 5. Yeah. We have an amazing, well, you get what you pay for, right? When tuition is $25,000 a year, that's what you get.
Okay. That's impressive.
Yeah.
Tell me, paint a little bit more of a picture of what the day is like for one of your preschoolers.
Oh, well, you never have to leave your car if you don't want to. We've got a car line in the front and a car line in the back. We've got armed security, as all Jewish programs do. The kids will say hello to the guards, say hello to the teachers that take them out of car line, and then they'll come in. Again, half inside, half outside on playgrounds. We've got 4 huge playgrounds, which are amazing. One playground alone is just a giant sandbox. with playground apparatus on it. Another one is the size, I'd say, I'm not very good at measurement, but about the size of 3/4 of a football field. And it's got basketball courts and jungle gym and bikes and huge blocks and shade and all kinds of building stuff. Another yard is really more for the younger kids, and another third yard is for loose parts and STEM. The kids will play in their classrooms. They've got, there are 3 or 4 teachers in a class. They've got their friends. We do STEM, we do literacy, we do social, emotional, and moral development. They have, music and dance and art and happy laughter pretty much all day.
Tell me more about the social, emotional, and moral development component. How is that introduced to this age group?
Well, the beginnings of social and emotional development really come from learning how to take turns, cooperating as you build friendships and making those friendships more meaningful and deeper, and respecting and accepting others. I have to share with you, this is, oh my gosh, maybe 10 years ago, we had a child who would never be able to actually walk or talk. He had a genetic defect. And the kids, as he came in with his mom and his wheelchair, the kids were sitting on the floor in circle time. And, 2 of the kids immediately said, "Oh my gosh, move over, because he needs enough room." But they actually picked him up off the wheelchair and put him on the ground with his assistant. He had like a helper. And the mom was about to walk out, and one of the kids shouted out, wait, you can't leave yet. It's his first day. We need to know if he has any allergies. And what she wanted to say was allergies. But they're all so sensitive to the needs of one another. Understanding boundaries, both physical boundaries, language boundaries, learning to negotiate, learning to solve problems together, learning how things connect and how there's a cause and effect. So when you learn all of those things, you then see how they affect one another. And the teachers really model it and talk about it throughout the day. There's a great book, by the way, How Full Is Your Bucket? And I remember one day walking in, I had done something to my hair, and one of the little boys said, "Oh, Tamar, your hair looks really nice." And then he looked at the teacher and goes, "I filled her bucket." And so, again, reading books, talking about it, telling stories, and again, just going through those things and making that social, emotional, moral development an intrinsic part of every day, partnering with parents, loving conversation, things like that.
Tamar, you're obviously responsible.
Oh, I don't hear you. Sorry.
Tamar?
Yeah.
Okay. You're obviously responsible for educating a lot of the educators, right? Teaching the teachers. I'm curious, as part of your own education process coming up, you mentioned one book in particular, How to Fill Your Bucket. Are there other specific books or mentors that have been particularly helpful for you in your career?
Oh, wow. Oh, I've got like a stack of them here. Here, I'll tell you what I'm working on right now. I read several books at a time. Here, there's a good one, The Connector Manager. This is a great book. And it's written by Roca and Wild, and it's Why Some Leaders Build Exceptional Talent and Others Don't. Okay. Which is a great book. The other one is by Shane Parrish, called Clear Thinking, Turning Ordinary Moments into Extraordinary Results. And again, I think of time as so precious, right? And then the other one is Start with the Why. I mark up all my books. And it's by Sinek. It's How Great Leaders Inspire Everyone to Take Action. So my goal in reading these books right now is, again, knowing that my time here on earth is limited. It's how to help others move forward with this same kind of work.
That's great. Simon Sinek also has a great TED Talk that he did years ago about the same topic that I think it was the first time that he kind of hit my radar, and I think it drew a lot of people to his attention.
Yeah. There's also, if I can share, there's a great podcast also. I want people to listen to yours, but there's a great one. I'm going to butcher his name. It's called The Hidden Brain by Shankar Vedantha. I believe that's how you pronounce it.
Okay.
And The Hidden Brain is all about, he has great people on there talking about all the different ways in which our brain can work or gets tricked, or how to, use what we know and how we think and to live better.
We'll make sure we find that podcast and include a link to it in the show notes.
There you go.
Tamar, I just have one more question for you, but before I ask it, I want to do two things. First of all, if you're listening today and you like today's content, please hit the subscribe, like, or share button on your favorite podcast app. Tamar, I also want to let people know the best way to get in touch with you. What's the best way to get
best way to get in touch with me is email. My email is Tamar, Tamar, .andrews@aju.edu.
Great.
That's the easiest.
Okay. Last question for you, Tamar. And we've already touched a little bit on this, but maybe there's some additional ways for you to expand on this. How do you see your industry evolving in the next 5 years? What do you think some of the biggest changes are that are still coming?
Ooh. Wow. I have this professional development I'm doing now called Finding the Right Pitch. And the pitch stands for the 4 environments a teacher creates. So it's the physical, interpersonal, temporal, and curricular. And if you do it right, you get the H, which is harmony in the classroom instead of dysregulation. I think the biggest change, I'm hoping the biggest change, is along those lines, which is not to look at the reading, the writing, and the math, but to really look, use a 360 view at what your role is as a teacher, as an administrator, and focus on all aspects of human development so that people don't come out just really smart, but really dumb, but come out really smart and really capable of being able to affect change.
I love that. Tamar, I want to be the first one for thanking you to share your time and your story with us today. I really appreciate it.
It was a pleasure.
Folks, that's a wrap on another episode of the Inspired Stories podcast. Thanks for learning with us today.